expeditions on its way.
You know, it's very cool. And the author, the great John Keel, a big name in this field, along with Brad Steiger, and actually they're longtime friends. They've been doing it a long time. So at this time, he was in an advanced age.
Yes.
But during this time, he was in his prime here, out digging up the facts.
Yes, when the story happened in the late 60s, he was a younger man. Astonishing Legends, as it is now, doesn't really afford us much to our disdain.
Well, we'd love to.
The ability to travel to all the places we talk about, that is something that we'd love to do. And if the show continues to be successful and grow like it's been growing, maybe someday we'll be able to actually go to these places and report on them locally. Some I would love to do. So go Legend Trip.
I think you did go there to
that's
one of the locations we'll be talking about, didn't you?
Yeah, that's why I brought this up. I'm excited to say that I've been to Point Pleasant. I stayed at Point Pleasant, and
it was pleasant.
It was, and I loved it. It's a great little town. I mean, I was born here near Death Valley in California, but I only lived there until I was about 2. My experience of growing up was in North Carolina, and small towns were a part of the fabric of my background, and I love small towns, especially in the South.
You're essentially OB from Mayberry.
Yes, that's me.
Yeah. Well, now you'd be a very successful film director.
Yes, yeah. My hairline's not quite as bad.
No, but I know exactly what you're saying. It's a kind of suburban / somewhat rural upbringing, and it's much different than somebody growing up in a major city. You have a lot more freedoms, a lot more time to check things out, the environment around you.
I loved it, and I loved Point Pleasant. I went there. My friend Jerry, who you may, actually our audience will know because he's the one I interviewed for What's Gotten Into You, which is one of the favorite episodes of people about
it's a creepy crawly one.
Yeah, the bug that went in his ear. Anyway, Jerry was moving from California to New York, where my wife and I had just moved a year earlier. So I flew across the country, and we drove back together. I rode with him, so we did one of those kind of non-stop trips. We packed up a U-Haul van and put a mattress in a way where there was like just a gap where someone could lay down so that we could drive and sleep without having to stop. We covered the distance pretty quick, but we did stop in Point Pleasant. And we stayed there at the historic Low Hotel.
It's in the movie.
Yes, it is. And it's an awesome, creepy old hotel, which we just added a member to the Astonishing Research Corps who was a resident of Point Pleasant. His name is Michael Heinlein. And he told me that either his grandparents or his great-grandparents actually used to own that hotel. But it was sold to a friend of the family. So that was fascinating to me. But anyway, we stayed there. It was definitely a spooky place. I don't know if it's supposed to be haunted. I didn't experience anything like that. But we went around and checked out the area and went down on the river shore. There's a flood wall there, an old flood wall that's kind of cool that they had a door that could close up if the river came up because it's pretty close down to the water line.
Did you see anything strange in the skies?
No, we didn't. And these days it's pretty quiet. We'll talk more about that. I don't think there's a lot going on, or if there is, they're not talking about it.
They weren't talking about it then either, but what makes this story significant is that we always try to impress on people that, yes, we're telling you a lot of these things that happened, and there's always a general sense to believe that, well, this place is a hotbed of activity, and that might be true, but these things are also very, very rare.
Yes.
In an individual's life, something strange that you might see or an encounter that you can't explain might happen once or twice in your life.
Right, and events are spread out. You get the sense when you hear the stories later that they're all compressed, much like it was with Skinwalker or whatever, but the truth is these things take place over a long period of time. Now, in this case...
Yes, on the other hand.
In this case, everything that happened in about 13 months.
Right.
The bulk of it, although there are loosely connected events bookending it that go further back with, I saw this, I saw that, but the bulk of what most people attribute to as to being related to what has made this story famous took place over a period of about 13 months.
But I think the number of incidents and accounts and witnesses, over 100 documented witnesses and accounts, that alone makes it very significant.
Indeed.
Which is why so many people pay attention to the story and have come to love it.
And as big as the story is here in North America, especially after the movie, which starred Richard Gere and Laura Linney, we know we have international listeners and folks who aren't familiar with it. So before we dive in too deeply, we want to give a brief overview of the story. In November of 1966, people living in the small town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, which we were just talking about, and its neighboring communities along the mighty Ohio River, began to see something extremely strange haunting the area. There were so many eyewitnesses that it's hard to say what the first official sighting was, but one of the ones most often referred to as kind of a starting point was a sighting by a National Guardsman on duty at the Point Pleasant 1092nd Engineer Battalion headquarters. He was on the base when he saw an impossibly large creature perched high in a tree, a fence bordering the base. It was so big, he thought it was a man, and he stood and he stared at it for quite some time. He couldn't make sense of it. So he's like, it must be a bird, but it's too big. It was the largest bird he'd ever seen in his life. He went to get someone else to come back and take a look at it, and when he returned, it was gone. So this event on its own, you probably wouldn't even tell this as a story. You would chalk it up to misinterpretation. And whatever. This guy himself didn't come forward with it until he started to hear more stories.
Yeah, at this point, it's not enough for yourself and probably for other people to hear. So I
saw it, but my mind must have been playing tricks on me.
Yeah.
Whatever.
I know tons of stories like that, and I have several friends that happened to, where it's kind of first of all, well, that's weird.
Yeah.
And then later on, okay, that's beyond weird.
You can really easily convince yourself in a one-off kind of instance like that you were mistaken.
Right.
Especially in this day and age. It's kind of like, it's so funny. My wife, when we're watching TV, we watch a lot of crime shows. And whenever they come on and somebody explains luminol and what luminol does, it's like we're at the Rocky Horror Picture Show. It's like, we know what luminol does. It's just, that's the same thing I would say about how people understand the value of eyewitness testimony. Even if it's your own eyewitness account, in this day and age, everyone knows that it's not always the most reliable thing. So you have to take any kind of eyewitness testimony with a grain of salt, versus when you see something on video, it's like, no, that's what I'm seeing. However, the problem with video is that the moment, whatever you're seeing, is out of context. You have no idea what happened before or after it. So it has its own deficiencies. But the National Guardsman, he probably would have never come forward had more and more cases not been coming out.
Right. It reminds me of another military-themed sighting, and forgive me for talking off the cuff here, but I believe it was Napoleon's nephew or something, some kind of relation, that saw the Jersey Devil flying near the post there with other people as well, and took a shot at it. It turned in the air. I remember this part. It's flying. It's this weird crypto creature flying in the air. He shot at it. It kind of did a roll in the air, kept on flying, and went away. But he wasn't the only one, so other people saw it. This is not the only time that this apparently has happened. Apparently throughout the ages.
Yeah.
Again, like the skinwalker, this might go back centuries.
Right. And when you talk about this, and you talk about cryptozoology, which is firmly labeled a pseudoscience, frankly, by Wikipedia anyway.
Oh, well.
I know, but I love cryptozoology, which is the study or the hunt for unknown animals.
We're discovering all the time, by the way.
That's right.
The googly-eyed squid.
Yeah.
Nobody knew about him. This little cute purple face there.
Right, so when you first see it, it's cryptozoological. Eventually, if you can apply the scientific method to it and put it into a species and a genus and all that, it's like, okay, now it's science, but whatever. The point is that people see things that they can't explain, and yes, sometimes the chupacabra, I think, probably is a dog with mange, sure, or whatever else. But there are other cases where people see things they can't explain, and that is the story with this giant human-sized bird that the National Guardsman saw. However, this story takes a whole nother turn almost right out of the gate, because the very next day after the National Guardsman saw this thing in the tree, a traveling sewing machine salesman named Woody Durenberger had an encounter with an extremely strange man outside of Parkersburg, West Virginia, which is just north of Point Pleasant along the Ohio River. This man was not a Mothman at all, but he was humanoid, and he called himself Indrid Cold. His demeanor was extremely disturbing to Durenberger, to say the least. Although these two encounters are not necessarily the very first ones in this chain of bizarre events, they are as good a place to kick off the story of the Mothman as any. And so tonight, we're going to begin with Durenberger's encounter with Cold, a man who described himself, if he was a man, as a searcher.
Hey, Scott, have you ever tried searching for the perfect job candidate?
Absolutely. For every gig, there's only a handful of people that are right for it, but finding them can be a job in itself.
I know exactly what you mean. In fact, with my current project, I had to call and email nearly 100 candidates trying to find people with the right qualifications and experience. Well, that was before we got hooked up with ZipRecruiter.com. Instead of calling 100 people, I could have posted to 100 plus job sites with just a single click, including social media networks like Facebook and Twitter. It's also a great solution if you're looking for a job. You can easily post your resume on ZipRecruiter.com and get a notification anytime someone checks you out.
As an employer, you can find candidates in any city or industry nationwide. Just post once and watch qualified candidates' resumes stream into ZipRecruiter's easy-to-use dashboard interface. The other problem with the old way is that you're then having to deal with a flood of inquiries. ZipRecruiter lets you quickly screen and organize job seekers to find the right person for the job, and fast.
Find out today why ZipRecruiter has been used by over 1 million businesses.
And right now, our listeners can post jobs on ZipRecruiter for free by going to ziprecruiter.com/legends.
That's ZipRecruiter.com/legends. One more time, to try it for free, go to ZipRecruiter.com/legends.
And now back to Astonishing Legends with Scott Drobrook and Forrest Burgess.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about Woodrow Dernberger. I thought it was Derenberger, but I did hear, I think in the interview that we're going to have some excerpts from tonight, I heard it pronounced Dernberger.
It's spelled like it's Derenberger.
It is spelled Derenberger, but I think it's Dernberger. Either way, we're going to call him Woody.
Okay. I think that's appropriate.
So this story takes place on November 2nd, outside of Parkersburg, West Virginia, where Woody Derenberger, who was a resident of Mineral Wells, West Virginia, which is about 55 miles northeast of Point Pleasant. He's a traveling salesman. He sold sewing machines.
Yeah, he had a service van that he drove
Yeah,
full of machines not only to sell, but to support his sales.
Exactly.
And he was coming back from Marietta, Ohio, right?
Yes, driving south on I-77 just outside Parkersburg, West Virginia, where 77 and Route 47, also known today anyway as Staunton Avenue, intersect. And this was in 1966. I want to point out something that Keel said in his book. We're going to be referring to John Keel's book, Tomorrow's Prophecies, a lot during this series. And one of the things that he said was that the interchange there, and I think I-77 was relatively new at the time. And he even made some implications about it being an intersection for quite some time, and he sort of delved into a few references about ley lines, which people have mixed feelings about.
Oh, sure, yeah.
That comes up again when we get down to the name of the character that Woody ran into, and I'll get back to that here in a second. But right now, whenever we do one of these shows, when something happens somewhere, I'm immediately on Google Earth. I've gone down to like Street View, and I'm looking, I was like, I'm there.
Well,
what I love, since we can't afford to actually go.
Yeah, we can't afford it. Where that really came in handy was the Somerton ad. You could see the intersection there.
Yeah.
And of course, it's all changed. There's an apartment building there. But when there's a definite location of something happening, especially in the intersection or crossroads, that's still there. Well, you could find it.
Yeah.
I did the same thing. So I know that Marietta, Ohio, you have to realize it's kind of on the border. He's only about 13 miles away from Parkersburg.
Right.
But he's heading home. He's had a full day of work. He's coming back.
Anyway, this is right next to another river, the Little Kanawha River.
Is it Kanawha?
Well, I don't know. I did that YouTube thing where the lady said it. And
I don't trust her. She's a robot.
Yeah, you're right. You can't trust women. They're taking our jobs.
And your medicine.
Anyway, the little river that we said a second ago, which is a tributary of the Ohio. Anyway, so Woody's driving down the road in his panel van, his sewing machine panel van, and a car passes him, goes flying by him as he's heading south towards Route 47. And this car is being trailed by a low-flying,
Very close to me.
yes, UFO. It's about 30 feet behind it, and the UFO itself is 35 feet long and maybe 9 feet wide.
Yeah.
And it's floating and chasing this car that went by. So first of all, I'd like to know where that person is.
Well, I've often thought about this. Were they in some kind of cahoots?
Yeah.
Because it was the opposite of what you see in Close Encounters, where the cop cars are chasing the ice cream cone there.
Yeah.
But it's a similar idea. The car zips past, and I can't remember from the interview if he described it as a black sedan, because then I started thinking,
Did he? Yeah.
I'm not
I
sure.
can't remember that either. By the way, the interview we're going to be playing excerpts from, we have a link to in the show notes. You can listen to it in its entirety. The audio, it was a television interview. It's audio only, and it's about 30 minutes, and it's fascinating. It's fun and interesting to listen to. So
Yes, and it's always been my just internal interpretation here that somehow those two vehicles were connected. As Woody describes it, it's much like a chimney on an old-fashioned kerosene lamp.
right.
The description of craft, right. And so it's kind of a weirdly shaped tube with flares at the end, bulging in the middle.
Yeah.
It's kind of end-to-end, so it's lengthwise, going down the highway, chasing or following,
Yes.
in tandem, this car that zips past.
Right.
Now, what happens once it gets
As
past
soon as it gets past him, it goes up in the road in front of him, and it turns sideways and settles down low enough, and it does not touch the ground, but low enough that there's no way he can go around it. In fact, he tried to go around it. He had pulled off into the grass a little bit, but there was just no way. And he also indicated that it did not come to an abrupt stop. He didn't have to lock up his brakes or anything.
No,
It actually sort of slowed gradually to give him an opportunity to slow down.
It meant to kind of get in front of him, slow him down safely, gently,
Yes.
stop, because it had some business with Woody. When I started thinking about the shape, you'll see pictures, of course, an artist depiction and a
And Chad's working on something too, which by the time the show goes up, you will see. So
Yeah.
you will have already seen it.
For you that have not checked it out, that are listening to the audio first, it kind of reminds me, have you ever seen those foot roller massagers that are usually wood, there's knobby kind of things, and you put them on the floor, and I think you can roll the sole of your foot over.
Yeah.
Or kind of a more fatter looking dumbbell.
Right.
A small hand weight.
Yeah.
Very light. So that's kind of what you have to picture here, and that's what Woody's talking about. Like what he means by the chimney on a kerosene lantern is that you have the bulbous shape of the lantern, and then, of course, the smoke has to get out the top somehow. So there's kind of a tubular attachment to the top that's on a spring, and it kind of flares out at the end. So imagine two of those on the opposite ends of this bulging kind of a tube.
Yeah.
That's kind of what he's describing here.
Yeah. I feel bad about this tangent, but I'm going to go ahead and say it. It looks a little bit like a kelp bulb.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know why that popped into my head.
No, I think it's
If you've ever had kelp wrap itself around your leg on the Pacific Coast when you're swimming, and talk about,
that's how frightening to grab,
But yeah, those little bulbs, it kind of looks like that.
It's just one of the many thousands of shapes described as unidentified flying objects. And this one's kind of important because it's a little odd. It's not your usual saucer shape or not even your standard cigar shape, which are some of the more common ones, and not even close to the black flying triangle yet.
Right. It stops in the road in front of it, and a door opens. Now, I want to be clear about this. This door, I wanted it to be a Star Trek door, or I wanted it to matter to appear, but apparently it had a good old-fashioned hinge on it.
Yeah.
It swung open, and a character, a gentleman, stepped out of it onto the ground. Now, I believe that Woody said it was floating
6 to 8 inches above the ground.
6 to 8 inches above the ground with no visible landing gear or anything like that.
And just to paint the scene here, so this thing has turned on its side, covering
Blocking the whole road.
the side of the road. He has pulled over so that 2 sets of wheels are on the dirt berm next to the highway. The other 2 are actually on the pavement.
Yeah.
His lights are on. His headlights are shining directly onto this craft.
Yes.
So he has a very good view. It's very well illuminated. It had been raining earlier, and it stopped at this point. It was just sprinkling. So the conditions were wet, but he can clearly see this thing.
Right. So the door opens.
Swings out.
Was the hinge on the bottom? No, it was on the side, I think, like a car door.
You can't see the hinge. It's not like poor workmanship. But you can see the hinge is there.
He describes it as a very, aside from the fact that it's floating in air, he describes it sort of very terrestrial.
Yeah.
In terms of its door.
It makes a sound like a car door. He described it.
Yeah, and he said it sounded like a car door. Actually, later when it closed as well. And this is a thunk. This comes back to a whole thing, which is going to be an ongoing theme in this series, of kind of an overly terrestrial nature to these seemingly non-terrestrial craft.
Some of them, yes.
Yeah.
That's one thing, though, Scott, that carries throughout all of ufology. There's every combination, varied description that you can imagine.
No, it's like the famous woodcutting, right? With all the things in the sky that everyone said they saw.
Oh, yes, you're talking about the battle over Nuremberg.
Yeah.
That's a different thing.
It's got a lot of shapes, though. I love those shapes. When I was a kid, I was like, wow.
That was also documented. Tons of townsfolk had seen it. It was, I don't know, early in the morning, a little after 6 a.m., but the sun had already started cresting. And so it wasn't just one person, but now you're talking about a medieval description of very strange happenings.
Yes.
This is not that. We have a very sober individual
Yes.
who seems clear-minded and not crazy,
Right.
telling a very peculiar story.
So this guy comes out of the crowd, he's walking towards the car, and he apparently is walking across Woody's headlights over to the side of the car that's safely on the side of the highway.
The right side of the highway, and you wonder about this. Why does it come to the driver's side? Well, there's traffic.
Exactly. He's following standard police procedure here. You don't approach on the side that puts you out in the middle of the road. You approach on the safe side, which is off to it. It's the other reason they park their cars at an angle, so that if another car hits it, it deflects it. Yeah, it glances off. But anyway.
Still doesn't keep people from hitting them.
No, because people are stupid.
There's a weird psychological phenomenon that I think especially people who are inebriated or intoxicated just gradually drift. It's like a moth to the flame kind of thing that will burn them, but they drift over. They can't kind of help it. They're attracted to it, and they smash it in the back of a Department of Transportation works vehicle.
Yeah.
That's why they have those giant scorpion tails on it for impacts. But this is all kind of planned. It's very smoothly done by this individual, and his whole deployment is very smooth.
Well, yeah, and here's the thing, though, that Woody talks about. As he's approaching the car, Woody hears him ask him to roll his window down on his passenger side of his truck.
Yes, and this is fascinating.
The interviewer specifically asked him at what point he got this question, and Woody said as he was walking towards the car. And what happened was Woody was hearing these messages from the guy who was getting out of the craft in his head. And
which he didn't know at first.
No, he wasn't aware of it. He was still in shock about the whole event. He was frightened. He made it very clear that he was scared.
He thought it was, of course, just a car, maybe a truck passing close out of the corner of his eye. Then he gets a good glance at this thing. Imagine it. It's all happening kind of quickly. The thing turns on its side. That's weird. The guy steps out of this weird-shaped object. So after he got out of the craft, the door closes. The vehicle shoots straight up into the air. Now, we can still see it. He says he kind of leaned forward. You can see it at the top of his windshield. So it's still in the sky.
Like 50 or 75 feet hovering.
Right.
But now passing cars are not going to see anything.
And that's another interesting thing. Cars are now, and trucks are passing as regular traffic on the highway. Not very crowded, but every once in a while. And as they pass, their headlights are on, and they illuminate this individual.
Yes.
So, to Woody's mind, like, this thing's real. He's a real guy. He looks totally normal. But, yes, he gets this request from this gentleman to roll the window down. Please roll your window down. I would like to speak with you.
Right. He leans over. He rolls the window. This is pre-power windows unless you had a Cadillac or a Continental.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah, so he's reaching over, hand cranking that window.
And the guy says, I would like to speak with you for a moment. And I think that is when Woody realizes that this guy's talking to me, but he's not moving his mouth.
Right.
Which then greatly excites him into kind of a mild panic as what is going on here.
At which point the man says to him mentally, don't be frightened. We mean you no harm. We wish you only happiness. Woody says the man then told him that his name was Cole. Did not say a first name. He just said Cole. In this encounter, he never said a first name, which is something I think a lot of people don't know.
Yes.
He just said his name was Cole. He had a giant grin. He was grinning. He had his arms folded. He was wearing, you could probably describe his wardrobe better.
Yeah, and keep in mind, Woodrow Derenberger here is describing this incident to Ronald Maines, who's the general manager of WTAP TV and radio out of Parkersburg,
Which is still there.
as a station. And this is the next day, so this is very, very fresh in his mind. He's very straightforward. He's not shaky. He's not flamboyant in his descriptions. He's very dead on. You all have a relative, I'm sure, like
He
that.
was stoic.
Yeah, he's stoic, but friendly and open, and it's kind of brave of him to be telling us.
Yeah, because you're going to get ridiculed.
Of course,
Hands down. There's no way you could not know that.
It's a small town, one of those places that everybody knows everyone else, and he knows that. But I think it was so compelling that he had to tell it. So he contacted somebody. So the next day, November 3rd, they arranged an interview. So Mr. Derenberger alleges that the contact happened November 2nd, 1966, about 7:25 p.m. These details are very fresh in his mind, but he describes this gentleman named Cole. He didn't ask Woody his name. He did it in a very odd way. He said, "What are you called? What are you called?" So Woody interpreted this like, "Oh, you mean what's my name?" So I said, "Well, it's Woodrow Derenberger," and he said, "I am called Cole." So that was a little odd. So as this is unfolding, he's kind of piecing this together, and he's looking at the man and noticing what he's dressed. It's pretty normal. He said, like what you would wear going into town. He's wearing a dark top coat. Yeah, that's an overcoat. It's a weather coat to be worn over your suit. So normally you just wouldn't, be bare chest or just have a t-shirt on underneath that.
Yes.
It's zippered in the front. He said there was kind of like two top buttons. Those were undone, so you can kind of see what's on underneath. And he said the top coat was very dark. Maybe, I believe, Ronald Maines, the general manager there, asked him and said, like, it was kind of dark navy.
And the names of 25 employees at the Washington plant who worked on those roles, telling the Senate Congress that Boeing has yet to comply.
She says the Justice Department was already investigating Boeing over 2 deadly 737 MAX crashes. Ramadan has begun with no ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas, despite U.S.-led negotiations. The U.S. and Israeli officials are blaming Hamas, saying the terror group hardened its position.
But U.S. efforts to reach a deal are continuing. The 6-week ceasefire would see 40 of the 132 hostages freed.
ABC's Jordana Miller says a ceasefire would also dramatically boost land deliveries of humanitarian aid during the Muslim holy month. President Biden says he regrets using the word illegal to describe a man charged with killing a 22-year-old nursing student in Georgia. Biden says he should have said undocumented person. The man from Venezuela, who is in the country illegally, is charged with murdering Blake and Riley last month. Former President Trump met Riley's parents before a rally in Georgia on Saturday. He mocked Biden for his apology. Trump's campaign says Biden should be apologizing to Riley's family. A new study by the Pentagon has examined reported UFO sightings from over the last 7 decades.
The Defense Department's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office found no evidence of aliens or extraterrestrial intelligence. The study analyzed U.S. government investigations since 1945 of reported sightings of unidentified anomalous phenomena, more popularly known as UFOs. It found no evidence that any of those planes were actually signs of alien life, or that the U.S. government and private companies had reverse-engineered extraterrestrial technology or hiding it. Sandy Wells, KFI News.
And Denver City Council is considering a proposal to remove sugary drinks from kids' meals. Lucky Pie General Manager Sarah Brown says her restaurant is ahead of the game.
We changed our kids' menus last fall to take off the sodas.
But Brown says most families are still drinking soda. If the measure is approved, kid combo meals across the city would only offer 2 choices, milk or water. Southland weather from KFI, some low clouds, clearing to sunny skies, highs in the low 60s at the beaches, mid-60s for Metro LA and Inland OC, low to mid-60s in the valleys and Inland Empire, 50s in the high desert, some areas of drizzle overnight in the IE, otherwise just mostly cloudy. We're going to see mostly cloudy skies tomorrow with highs in the mid-60s, warming to about 70 on Wednesday, mid-70s with sunny skies Thursday through the weekend. It's 50 in Diamond Bar, 54 Newport Beach, 48 in Palmdale, 53 in Whittier. The KFI Market Report brought to you by Revive Real Estate. The Dow is down 61 points. The NASDAQ is trading down 34, and the S&P 500 is off 11.
Revive Real Estate will buy your home, then renovate it, then sell it, and pay you again for the additional profit from the renovation. Go to KFIRevive.com to see if your home qualifies.
Checking in with the KFI in the sky. We've got a crash in East LA on the 5.
Just watch the clears. The northbound side of the 5 just past Calzona. The damage is done. It's going all the way back from the 605, resulting from that earlier crash. Northbound side of the 110, actually southbound too, between the 105 and 10. Pretty ugly, especially the northbound side. Don't forget, we have major closures in the canyons today. The PCH, Pacific Coast Highway, is shut down between Big Rock and Las Tosas. Also, Topanga Canyon itself is shut down, basically from the top of the pass all the way down to Pacific Coast Highway. Westbound side of the 10, it is terrible from Western as you make your way on out to, all the way to the 10, actually, or on 4 or 5. Little closer on KFI in the sky.
This, you'll never know that until you experience it here yourself. It's that feeling when you're at Disneyland Resort, and there's no better time than now. Inner peace. For me, it's the aroma of lavender and candlelit bath, enveloped by a rainforest soundscape. Enlightenment. Here I come.
Free one-day delivery on bath bombs and millions of other items. Whatever you're into, it's on Prime.
KLA Dodger fans, step up to the plate for the Spectrum Season Ticket Sweepstakes. Visit a participating Spectrum store and enter for a chance to win our grand prize, a pair of Los Angeles Dodgers season tickets. Plus, hundreds of bonus winners can win a 50-inch smart TV. Hustle. Sweepstakes ends March 17th. For more information and official rules, go to spectrum.com/2024sweepsLA. No purchase necessary. Open to U.S. residents 18 plus and California. Odds of winning vary by location. Void where prohibited.
Every March, Jersey Mike's turns money from subs into charitable donations.
And March 27th is Jersey Mike's annual day of giving, where 100% of sales from every sub are given back to the community.
And to kick off all that giving, Peter gave me an apron. I'm honored.
Looking good, Daddy. We've got subs tonight, though.
Now I know why you gave me the apron. Join us Wednesday, March 27th for Jersey Mike's Day of Giving. Be a sub above. fans, it's tournament time. The thrill and excitement of March Mania is here, and you can get in on the action with DraftKings Sportsbook, one of America's top-rated sportsbook apps. New customers bet on any college basketball national tournament game and turn $5 into $150 instantly in bonus bets. That's right. To celebrate college basketball's most frenzied time of the year, DraftKings is giving new customers a shot to rack up some bonus bets. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use promo code IHEART. New customers can bet $5 to get $150 instantly in bonus bets only with DraftKings Sportsbook with promo code IHEART. That's promo code IHEART. The crown is yours. Must be 21 or older. Indiana only. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. Eligibility and deposit restrictions apply. Terms and sports
Or navy blue. So imagine that's kind of the color, just a very very dark bluish color. Woody said it was glistening, it was shiny, almost metallic looking. And that as the cars drove by, it glistened and kind of shined in the headlights. So he said, yeah, very shiny material, very unusual for the time, what Woody's wife would call a heavy material or a heavy fabric. And underneath, he said he had kind of a regular shirt, no tie, but the shirt was a little darker than the coat. And then he had regular trousers on, and those were a little lighter than the coat, but also kind of that same color, kind of a darkish, bluish hue. But at least with the trousers, he said, it looked to be made out of the same material, that kind of metallic looking, very futuristic. Yeah, every spacesuit you see in the 50s, they're wearing usually it's a silver suit of some kind. But earlier I thought it was kind of maybe a flight suit, but it wasn't. So just kind of normal clothes, but yeah, no tubes on this one. No tubes, no bubble helmets. Yeah, no breathing apparatus. He looks pretty normal as we describe him. Thick head of hair, dark brown, and slicked back kind of, but a little longish. And he said he had a deep tan. Yeah, nothing unusual, not like a spray can formulation, but that maybe he'd been outdoors and, working or something. He looked like he was just heavily tan. That's kind of the physical description. Maybe it was trauma. I think he would have said orange. Right. That were the case. And maybe some kind of a dead squirrel on his head. Right. It's nothing visually that's too upsetting, other than he came out of a big metal tube, which was, he described it as charcoal colored. Yes. Too. Maybe kind of dull, not real shiny, I don't think, but yeah, kind of a dark gray, very charcoal, as he described it. So other than that, the guy looks pretty normal. And he said that his persona was very friendly, like he was very trying to be calm. But again, to an average human, anything happening in that appearance, that normally doesn't happen. So he was trying to keep. Woody got the impression he was trying to keep him calm as well, and put him at ease. And twice, Woody said Cole asked him, "You can either communicate with me by thinking, or you can just talk to me. Yeah, whatever is more comfortable for you. Whatever works for you." Of course, Woody's not used to mental telepathy with strangers, or kind of a strange clairvoyance. So that alone is upsetting. Well, the guy doesn't know. He's just like, "I'm giving you the choice."
Well, and that brings me to one of my favorite things that Woody said in the interview. He said that Cole then asked him what the city was in the distance because they were right outside of Parkersburg. He says he indicated this by pointing. Well, actually, here, let's just play what he said.
I told him my name, and when I told him my name, he said he was called Cole. That was the name he was called by. And he asked me what the city of Parkersburg, he pointed to the lights. He didn't point, but he gave the impression that he was pointing. He asked me what that was called. And I told him it was Parkersburg. It was a city, a town. And he asked me if most all the people lived in this city or town. And I explained to him that it was a place of business. It's where we transacted our business. But the people lived in communities, outlying communities, most of the people. And when I told him that this was a city, he said that his home was, that was called a gathering.
Right. Okay. So my favorite part of that is when Woody says he didn't point, he gave the impression he was pointing. I love that. He gave the impression he was pointing. So all of his communication is coming through into his mind. He gave the impression he was pointing. Well, he's standing there with his hands under his armpits.
He's standing there with his hands under his armpits. I think not that he had weird chili and claw hands. Or dog. Dog hands.
And no, actually, Woody said that later when he went back to the crowd, craft, an arm reached out and helped pull him into the craft.
Yeah,
He
close
saw
the door.
that arm and that hand, and he said it looked completely human.
Yeah, they're completely normal.
And the door closed with a car door kind of nut. A car door.
Yeah.
So we got a flying lantern chimney that has car door sounds.
But a solid American car door. What's interesting here is that you can tell by the body language, I think, with the hands under the armpits as non-aggressive.
Yeah.
You see people do that, especially when their hands are cold. They got their hands tucked under their armpits, so arms folded. And it's kind of like, I'm not casual. I'm not trying to reach out to you.
But it lends itself, though, to the whole idea that these visitors, and there's going to be more of them in this story, don't exactly know how to look natural or how to behave normally. Their body language is a little weird. Their voices are often described as sort of sing-song and kind of unusual.
Right.
And this is a way of standing that, yes, you're capable of standing like that with your hands in your armpits. And some people, I think, genetically are predisposed to maybe do that their whole lives, but it's not a majority of people. I think when most people stand with their arms folded, they stand with them folded in front of them, not necessarily tucking your palms up into their pits. But some people do that, but not many.
Mary Catherine from
Mary Catherine Gallagher, yes. Molly
great.
Molly Shannon.
Sniffer arm.
Yes.
No, I think in this, again, the gesture that he's doing, he's trying not to scare this guy. I'm sure he's an intelligent creature. Maybe he realized, like, well, there's not much I can do. I just came down from a big metal tube. He's going to be scared, and I'm communicating with him through my mind. But he's trying to be as nice as possible. But he does have some questions for Woody. Listen to this.
He told me not to be frightened, which I was. I was very frightened. And as far as I can understand, this was all mental. There was no spoken words from him. I knew what he was asking me, but yet he stood there and his mouth did not move. He had a smile on his face. He appeared very courteous and friendly.
So as the interview goes on, the journalist continues to ask him, did you ever believe in flying saucers prior to this incident? And he says, what would you think of a story like that?
I believe now that they couldn't happen. If someone would have told me yesterday before this happened, I would frankly thought it was a no. But I honestly believe now that it could happen. I'm sure we're not going to say it couldn't happen. Like he said last night, or this man, he gave me no indication that he wanted me on his ship. He didn't ask me to get out of my truck. As I say, he was very friendly and courteous.